Hello and welcome back to Real Estate School. I'm your host, Michael Montgomery, and today we're talking about building a prospecting plan for you that does not suck. Now, when we're thinking about prospecting, almost everybody feels like it's cringy, like it's salesy, like it's not enjoyable. When in fact, you can build these amazing prospecting plans that are enjoyable, that do not feel salesy, and can drive a ton of business. How do we go about doing this? Well, there's a few simple steps that you can follow to build the perfect prospecting plan for yourself that you enjoy doing. First off, let's understand that most real estate agents, almost all of them, do not prospect. Almost none of them. So, what does this mean for you? This means that even if you're willing to do a small amount of prospecting, a very, very little amount of prospecting, you're still doing a lot more than the average agent. Now, here's the other thing is most of us think that other agents are prospecting all of the time. We have this image in our mind when in fact there are really two types of agents who are prospecting all the time. They are top producers and they are future top producers. The remainder tend to not prospect very frequently or they don't actually have a schedule that they follow. So with that in mind, let's go about building a prospecting plan that can make sense for you. Now, when we first start to do this, what happens in a lot of ways is our eyes are bigger than our stomachs in the sense that we think that we are going to make X number of calls per week or per day. And in fact, when we start to do this, we realize after day one that this is not something that we can sustain. And the reason for that is we bite off way more than we can chew. So we are going to discuss what is the right amount of prospecting to do and how can you do it so that it is enjoyable. But with any type of prospecting, we are going to deal with rejection. There's truly no way around this. We are going to be rejected at some point in time when we're asking for business and that person says no. So, what we have to do when we're approaching any sort of prospecting plan is understand that anytime I'm prospecting, we are always detaching from the outcome. No questions asked. Regardless of how we're prospecting, what we're saying, who we're talking to, we are always detached from the outcome. Because here's the reality of it we don't necessarily need any one client. I don't necessarily need that one client that I'm talking to. And I am completely detached from the result. Now, that doesn't mean that when somebody says no to me, it doesn't sting. It does sting. But what I can tell you is if it stings for a long period of time, over the course of your career, that sting is going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. So over time, it will still sting, but it just doesn't sting for that long. Now, why doesn't it sting for that long? Well, the reason it doesn't sting for that long is because I'm detached from the outcome. And the other reason is I am understanding that everything is practice. And so, because when I'm approaching these conversations, it's practice and I'm not worried about the outcome, there's really no failure if you think about that. If you're not concerned about the outcome, and if what you're doing right now is just practice, there's truly no win or lose. There's really just improvement because all we're doing is we're practicing. So if we approach our prospecting plan with that mindset, that's going to change our lens completely. Because now we are looking for genuine conversations. We are not looking to be salesy. We're not looking to close because we need that client. Instead, we're looking to build this genuine relationship. And then if it blossoms into deals, wonderful. So let's talk about setting up that plan. So, the first thing that you need to do is if you do not prospect on a regular basis, so if you don't actually have a prospecting plan or you don't prospect regularly, then you have to start from the ground up. You have to start, in a sense, like you have never prospected before. And so, how do we do this? We make it ridiculously easy. It has to be so easy that it's almost laughable in many ways. And then we can start to scale up from there. But we need about a month of extreme easy prospecting so we can start to understand what this is like and we can get into a routine. So, what exactly does ridiculously easy look like? Well, there are two tips for you here. Personally, I generally prospect 1 day a week. So, I have 1 day a week that I focus most of my prospecting efforts on. Now, the reason for this is I don't tend to want to be focused on prospecting every day because it takes a certain mindset. And so when I'm in prospecting mode, I'm in prospecting mode. When I am in content creation mode, I'm in content creation mode. And so because of that, All I really need is one day that I'm open to prospecting. Now, what I suggest here is not necessarily just prospecting one day. Instead, we want to get in the slow habit of talking to people on a regular basis. So, if you are just starting out, here is a ridiculously easy strategy that you can use. First off, choose a day that you want to prospect. Now, my suggestion is either Tuesday or Friday. Reason for that, Tuesday can be a good day because Monday has passed. Monday's very busy for people. It's hard for people to get back to you on Mondays. And Tuesdays, things tend to start getting into a routine. The other thing I like about Tuesdays is we can still kind of ask them about what they did over the weekend. We can still make a personal connection there because we have the weekend to fall back on as a topic of conversation. Now, Friday works in a similar way, where we have the topic of conversation, which is the upcoming weekend. But on top of that, people tend to be a little bit more relaxed. The one reason why you may not want to use Friday is if by the end of the week you're starting to feel tired and you just don't think you're going to get it done. If that's the case, then focus on Tuesday. So I tend to like Tuesday and Friday as my prospecting day. Now, think about this momentarily. You now have to prepare to prospect one day a week. Now, in what world have you ever learned that you have to prospect one day a week? That's all you truly need, is if you have one day a week that you are focused on prospecting, that's all you really need. Now, what do we go about doing on this one day? Now, how do we go about actually prospecting? How does this work? Well, we have our one day now of prospecting. And then we also mentioned that we don't just want to focus on this one day. We also want to get into the routine of having conversations. So the way that we do this is we call it one text a day. So every single day, you have to do one outbound text to a potential client or to somebody who is not your close friend or your family member. So basically, this equates to one outbound attempt per day. Now, what you're saying to yourself is this seems extremely easy, and it is. It is very easy. We are just simply sending one text. Now, what are we saying in that text? We're not actually soliciting business. A really good way to just start any conversation is letting somebody know that you were just thinking about them. And so you can then start a conversation over text by saying that this person just jumped into your mind because of reason. And all you have to do is do one of those a day. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to get you in the habit of outbound marketing. So you're starting to get into the habit of reaching out to people on a regular basis. So that's the one text a day. Very, very simple. And then we move on to our prospecting day. And on our prospecting day, all we're going to do is we're going to make 2 phone calls. And so over the course of the week, we have texted 5 people. If we're working 5 days a week, we've texted 5 people. And then one of those days, we also made 2 phone calls. Now, you may be thinking that that isn't enough. But again, let's not let our eyes be bigger than our stomachs here. Let's start with the ridiculously easy and then scale up from there. Now, here's another really cool concept is even if that is your limit, you're just not willing to do any more prospecting than that, great. At least you're doing some. At least you're doing some form of prospecting. And you're doing more prospecting and doing this strategy than most other real estate agents out there. So there are agents who will end up starting to do this and say, you know what, this is my limit. I have other ways that I want to prospect as well. Great. That's perfectly fine. You can actually just cap it at this if you would like. That being said, after about a month of doing this, then you can start to scale it up. But you don't want to scale it up quickly. Where you scale it up to is then 2 texts a day, and then you move on to 5 phone calls on your prospecting day. But my suggestion here is do not even focus on that until you've gone through your 1 month of very simple prospecting. Now, there is something to keep in mind here, and it's if you are focusing on online leads, this concept of prospecting one day and only doing 2 phone calls may not work because it really depends on how you're going about building your business. So what we're assuming in this case is you are focusing on your SOI and you're focusing on your database. Now, this doesn't mean that you aren't getting leads from online sources, but it means once that lead has entered into my funnel, I'm now considering that person part of my SOI. I'm trying to get that person to understand the value of using a realtor and also helping to create a personal connection with that person, regardless of where they came from. So this moves us into the next strategy. And the next strategy is stop doing prospecting that you hate. So many times we're told to do certain types of prospecting, but we can't stand it. For example, I have never called an expired listing. I very rarely, if ever, would do circle prospecting. Why? Because I don't care for that type of prospecting. For me, that's just not enjoyable. Instead, if you're my client, or you're a past client, or you're a potential future client, or you're just a contact that I know in my city, I'd much rather just shoot you a text and say, hey, how are you? And then have that turn into a conversation or into a lunch or into a coffee. And then at that point in time, they'll very likely ask, how is the market? So, what we need to be focused on here is prospecting activities that we like. And that's why I say text and phone. Text and phone works quite nicely because for most of us, texting somebody is not overly challenging. It's asynchronous, so it lowers the pressure. The phone is not asynchronous. We're having an actual conversation, which makes it a little bit more challenging. But again, we have to be able to be comfortable on the phone. So we have to slowly start to work our way up there. But that being said, let's start with text messages and let's start with 2 phone calls a week. Now, if you're saying that there's no types of prospecting that are of interest to you, well, I would just pause for a moment and think that honestly, everything in life is prospecting. When you're going to the grocery store, when you're dropping the kids off at school, when you're taking your dog for a walk in the dog park, that's all considered prospecting. That is all a form of prospecting. Prospecting isn't just necessarily sitting down, getting a list of names and numbers and calling them and asking them if they're going to buy and sell real estate. That, in my opinion, is not fun. It's not prospecting. It's literally just banging your head against the wall. And that's not the way that I have chosen to build my business. So, the beauty of real estate and the beauty of prospecting is we can do this in a million different ways. However, coming back to this ridiculously easy strategy of just sending one text message a day and 2 phone calls on our prospecting day can be such a great starting point because now we're getting into these one-to-one conversations. And then from these conversations, we're then leading into in-person meetings and interactions. So, what are we talking about when we're on the phone with these people or when we're texting them? Well, mostly what we're talking about is them. We're just wondering what's new in their life. We're saying something reminded us of them, and then we're starting the conversation. But there's an important point here, and it's that they're going to ask us about real estate. And so we all know that we need to be able to answer the question of how is the market? Now, another strategy that you can use here is having a spiky point of view. Now, what is a spiky point of view? It's a term coined by Wes Cow. You can find her on Twitter. Absolutely genius. She has tons of great material. But basically, what this is it's a point of view that we have that might be different from others or that could be debatable. Now, the reason why this can be very effective is having a point of view on the market. This is what can actually lead to a great conversation. Now, oftentimes we're taught to just not say anything until they've indicated what their interests are in real estate. And a lot of times that makes sense. If I'm sitting down with somebody who's looking to buy or sell real estate, I want to know a lot more about what their goals are before I go and put my point of views forth. However, if I'm prospecting, I'm having conversations with people. People are saying, what's new in the market? What's happening with interest rates? How is that impacting our market conditions? I want to have a point of view on that. And yes, I will take a step back. And if they are wondering for their own personal interest, or if they are looking to buy and sell, then my approach might be different. But my approach will still also have a point of view to it. And so you should have a point of view. You should have a point of view on what is going on in the market. What direction is the market going? And it's okay if it's slightly contrarian. But that being said, we don't necessarily want to be negative, but we also don't want to embellish and be overly positive because that's not trustworthy. Now, when it comes to these point of views, it's very important that we have them because that means that we understand the market. But it's equally as important, if not more important, how we communicate them. So if we have the perspective that the market is very likely going to drop in the near future and we're talking to a potential seller, it's not overly strategic for us to worry them and to say, hey, we're in a free fall here. That being said, if we are in a free fall, I want to ensure that I'm communicating everything to them appropriately. So when I am talking to a seller, and if I do see the market dropping, then my discussion to them is going to be how important it is to be strategic with pricing, to understand the market, to know what we're doing when it comes to marketing. So how we're communicating these point of views is equally, if not more important than having them all together. So what else can we do in order to make this prospecting plan work for us? Well, we also have to think scalable. What can we do once that a lot of people will see? Now, the easiest strategy here, and one that we all need to be using, of course, is social media. So understanding social media from a prospecting perspective is important. Understand that when you are putting something out on social media, anyone who ends up seeing it, that in a lot of ways is reminding them that you're in real estate. So understand that social media is just like anything else when it comes to prospecting, but it's very, very scalable. Now, it is also very short lived in the sense that we can't just post once, of course, and then all our problems are solved. So we have to be consistent with it. Now, what happens if we know the importance of social media? However, we're also struggling with consistency. Well, when it comes to that, blocking off a certain amount of time every single day and working on your social media at that time is a great strategy. And so the way that we do this is we have it time bound. We have it time bound in the sense that I have half an hour to work on social media. After half an hour, I'm done. So I'm not waiting until my post is done. I'm not working on social media until my post is done. I'm putting time bounds. And time bounds add constraints, which are very powerful because it causes us to actually work within that period of time. And it also gives us an end date, an end time. And without that, we're just going to continue working on social media until it's potentially done, which it never is. It's like a conveyor belt, it just keeps going. So we do need to be time bound. Now, if even that doesn't work, no problem. There are so many great solutions out there. Hire it out, hire out your social media. Now, I have a social media manager. She does an amazing job. I'm super grateful to have her. And that's just because dedicating that amount of time every single day is not realistic right now. So she's been fantastic to really help take a lot of this work off our plates. So this is what you can think about doing too, depending on where you're at in your career. If you're early on in your career, you should definitely be doing all of this yourself, 100%. But if you're later in your career, it may be time to start thinking, how do I delegate some of this? And how do I find somebody who is very likely better than us at this form of prospecting? And yes, it's scalable, and that is the power behind it. If we're not doing that, then we are not getting in front of nearly enough people in order to continue to expand our business. Now, on the topic of social media and on this topic of being time bound, we can do this with all of our prospecting. And instead of saying, here's the list of people I have to get through, give yourself a time. So you have a certain amount of time to prospect. And once that time is up, you're done and on to the next thing. Again, we are adding constraints, and constraints can actually increase creativity and it can actually increase our productiveness because instead of just waiting for something to get done and refreshing our email, now we have time. We have a certain time that we need to be focused on this, and then we're done. And it's a very, very powerful strategy when it comes to prospecting, social media, or any tasks that we have. Now, finally, when it comes to prospecting, we need it to be enjoyable. And not all of us are going to prospect in the same way. Depending on our personality types, we may be prospecting with just pure interest in how that person is doing. However, we also might be the personality where we are a lot more focused on the mechanics of real estate and we're very interested in what's going on in real estate. In which case, my prospecting is going to be a lot more focused on the market and in real estate. So understand your personality, but always be curious. At the heart of everything is curiosity. And so if you are the type that really likes to understand the real estate transaction, understand everything about real estate in your community, but you're less inclined to just reach out to somebody and say, hey, how are you doing? Then focus on market conditions, focus on sales in their community, focus on things that you're learning about real estate that can impact your clients, and then communicate that. And that is another very powerful strategy. And a lot of us respond very well to somebody who's just reaching out and saying, hey, how are you doing? And being curious is at the heart of this concept, is just purely being curious as to how they are doing as individuals or as families. This is a very powerful concept. But with that, we can also understand that if our style is more focused on understanding real estate, and we love real estate, and we love design, and we love what's going on in comparable market activity, all of that, then we want to be communicating in that way. And both of those strategies are equally as powerful. With that, thank you very much for watching or listening to this episode. Remember, you can reach out anytime on Instagram. I'm at the.michael.montgomery or head over to revrealestateschool.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next lesson.